Today's video is sponsored by the team over at coinledger.io. If you're a US-based crypto mining enthusiast, I bet you didn't know you have until the end of 2022 to harvest your capital losses in crypto for the upcoming tax season. CoinLedger.io has made the tax loss harvesting process super easy for home crypto miners. Get this. In a few easy steps, you can have CoinLedger.io pull your wallet transactions and generate a simple tax loss harvesting report. This then allows you to see projected capital losses that can be written off in the upcoming tax season. Bam, bam, thank you, ma'am, you're done. I have partnered with CoinLedger.io to offer this entirely free to the community, as well as CoinLedger.io is also hosting a free giveaway event. Full details and links in the description of today's video.
What is going on, miners, and welcome back to the Hobbyist Miner channel. Well, we are joined by a guest, the CEO of FLUX, Daniel Keller. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey guys, how are you doing?
So today,
everybody out there,
everybody, the world,
in the world.
So today, guys, we are getting together with him. We've gotten together with him several times over the past. We've had a lot of fun chatting about FLUX and being transparent and bringing reality to the forefront here, coming from a home GPU miner's perspective and node operator's perspective. So today, we're going to chat with him about the FLUX Halving. There's been a lot of questions around it within the community. It's coming up here very soon. It's new to a lot of people, so I invited him on to talk about it. So you ready to jump in?
Absolutely, sir.
All right, so let's talk about this. For those that are unfamiliar with the FLUX Halving at a 50,000 foot level, what is it?
So if you're new to mining or you have new to the blockchain space, you probably have not been through a halving yet. You know, OGs in the space have been through it with Bitcoin, Litecoin, other products, Ethereum, so on and so forth. FLUX's halving is, I mean, basically we're a deflationary model. So you got to throw out all the concepts that we know about current monetary policy, because essentially we live in a debt-based society, right? So they just print more money. You know, they just did $1.7 trillion and they're just going to print that out of nowhere. So, you know, a couple rules of finance that are really, to make something valuable, it needs to be scarce. So when Satoshi Nakamoto sat down and looked at Bitcoin the first time, the Bitcoin network halves every 4 years. The FLUX blockchain halves every 2. So, you know, it's a little bit different. We do it a little bit quicker than what BTC does, because essentially, you know, FLUX is a fork of BTC. It's a FLUX, originally a fork of Zcash. Then we removed all the privacy. Then it was back to Bitcoin, and here we are again with FLUX. So
got it.
The importance of that halving. And there's really two components to FLUX. You have the node side of the house and you have the mining side of the house. Everybody gets paid out of the block reward. So if you're a miner or node operator, you're getting paid out of the block reward. As the halving comes along, it basically halves both the node operators and the miners at the same time, and you'll be getting half the rewards you were before the halving, which freaks everybody out, right?
What?
They flip out.
You're messing with my money, Dan. You're messing with my money.
They get nervous, they panic, they worry, they say, oh my God, now I'm going to make less on my miner. Well, it's actually counterintuitive, because you think in the short term, right, that you will make less FLUX. There's no doubt about that. You're going to make half the FLUX that you did. So now you can do one of two things. You can scale with the network and stand up twice the hardware, which is what a lot of people do. I run nodes. I'm going to run twice as many nodes because I have a particular area I want to be at. I have to stand up twice as many nodes. Or, you know, you may choose to turn your rig off, or you may choose to turn your node off, and then that benefits the folks that stay on the network. Now, halvings historically for other projects have not been fairly successful, or they've been lackluster. And we won't name any names of who recently had one, but it was kind of, that's okay. Yeah, but it was lackluster, and there's a reason for that.
Yep.
The reason for that is for your cryptocurrency or your or token or asset or whatever it is to be valuable, it needs to be scarce. And then there's another piece of that as well. It has to have a use case, right? Okay. So if it's only speculatory in nature, it will only move as the market moves.
Okay.
With Flux, we've baked Flux into everything. Whether you have to stand up a node, you need Flux. If you want to deploy a website, Flux. If you want to use Flux Drive, Flux. If you want to use Fusion, Flux. Every single component in the Flux ecosystem has been built around and geared toward the increase of the asset as it starts to move up, right? So we've put in basically these different trigger points as the price of Flux goes up, the total amount of Flux needed goes down. Supply, as more people that come into the ecosystem, the more demand drives the price, unlocks, and comes back down. It's actually kind of pegged to fiat in deployments and things like that. Okay. So yeah, the long story short is it is an absolutely imperative and necessary piece of technology for a deflationary model, and that's exactly what Flux is.
Got it. Okay, so that makes a lot more sense as to that. So give us the example, so for people that are lost already, that's already gone over their head, regarding the fact of, if this did not occur, long-term, what would occur when we're looking at Flux's supply and demand as well as price?
Yeah, so let me give an example real quick, because this is how I kind of explain it to my friends or whoever are asking. Say you're a baker and you're baking pies and you have 10 pies sitting out there, right? Okay. And you have 10 people that show up to buy those 10 pies. Well, then that's great, right? You've made money on all those. And you continue to keep baking, but now you could only do 5 pies, but you have 10 people showing up. So what happens with that? Do we keep the pies the same price, or do we raise the pies up to match demand? And then all of a sudden, now you've doubled your output, but let's say now 20 people come in, right? Yep. And then 30 and 40 and 50. So as the demand increases, you're going to continue to keep increasing, whatever infrastructure it is to do that, whether you have to make more pies or you have to, mine or, run nodes for more Flux. So that's kind of like a simplistic way to think of it, but yep. Supply and demand is the backbone of the halvening. And to answer that other question that you had, if we did not have a halvening, it would not continue to, it would take a longer period of time for adoption. The reason we set our halving schedule so much quicker than what Bitcoin is because we knew that the demand for the technology would be greater than, or it would be less than, 4 years. Because 4 years is like a gazillion years in blockchain, right? Yeah. Let's face it, 4 years is a lot can happen in 4 years. So we needed to get
come and go in 4 years. Like, let's be honest here. Yep.
So we wanted to reach critical mass quicker, and if we didn't do that, it would just be an extended period of time. There are projects, or there used to be projects that didn't put halvenings into their schedule. And then you saw these people come out with, token burns and all these different stuff to manipulate the economic model. Well, if it's hard coded, you can't argue with code. Every, 4 years, 2.5 years, whatever the halvening schedule is, that's what's gonna happen. So that's one thing, is it's very predictable, and it does drive use case, and it gives us the ability also to scale the network quickly.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So we talked about the Flux halvings every 2 years. Is that literally based off a scheduled time and date, or is that based off a block? Like, how is that determined with Flux?
It's a block height. It's basically it comes down to, we have 2-minute block time. So, it comes down to, a certain block height, and then that's when the halvening. We actually have a little countdown clock that runs, and it resets after the halvening and starts to count down to the next one.
So where is that on runonflux.com, or where do we find that at?
It's floating around Twitter somewhere. I'll link it to you.
Link it to me. I'll put it in the description, so if people are curious and want to follow along with it, I think that'll be super helpful. So traditionally, now I guess this is a hard question there, because we've seen this not go so well for other projects, but traditionally in other projects, do we see an increase in value or any price discovery when a halvening occurs? Because when you're talking about an economic model, we've gone ahead and now we've increased demand and decreased supply. But what have you seen in the space in the past?
Okay, and I have to put the asterisk out there. Not investment advice. I'm not an investment advisor. I know jack shit about any.
Put it on a shirt.
Any of that stuff, right? But but my experience has been it can go one of two ways. It can be valuable for the platform and push the platform up, the asset price up, because ultimately it's supply and demand. There's less asset in circulation. And there can be some short-term, perhaps fear after it. And you're also going to have shaking out of the weak hands. So there are people that will shut their rigs off or shut their nodes off because they're looking very short term. They're looking at, I don't make money today, right? So you're not looking at a delayed return on investment into tomorrow. So for instance, I mined ETH when it was $1.25 an ETH, right? So put that in perspective to what it was on the grander scale. I had a very long vision though, right? I looked at it as not being a 1 year play or 2 year play. And there was many times I paid from the electric bill out of my dirty fiat. I just did, right? Because I wanted to have the asset. So every miner or node operator has to sit down and understand what their investment in the project can be and how it's going to impact them personally. Personally, I'm a firm believer if you believe in the project and you're dedicated to 5 years, 10 years down the road, then you just keep plowing your resources into it. You keep working on what you're doing, and obviously as FLUX continues to deploy proof of use of work and other components that come into play that require FLUX. We haven't even had enterprise people start to enter the space yet. So what does that look like? So I don't give price predictions. All I can tell you is that my sentiment around what's going to happen to the other side of FLUX is good. I think again, highly volatile asset class across the board. This is crypto, right? So, do your own research, only invest what you can afford, and make sure you do due diligence on it. Whatever it is, whatever you think is the right amount, that's what you put in.
So if we pivot over to GPU miners here, because that's kind of the driving force behind FLUX in the ecosystem there. So GPU miners, based off of what you've said so far, what they can expect on, I think it's like February 4th or whatever the countdown timer comes to, is that whatever you're mining with now, you'll see half of that hitting your wallet. And I think what you have talked about many times when you and I have gotten together is the fact of you're mining for the past, the present, and the future with FLUX. So I think this is most going to impact the individuals that are I cash out FLUX once a week or cash out once a day. That's going to impact people the most. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the people that are in FLUX for the long term to go ahead and take advantage of these snapshots and take advantage of the parallel assets, they're not really going to see a huge difference. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I feel like that I think that's an astute observation. I think that's exactly what it is. You're going to have your short-term people that are maybe they're, we affectionately called them shitcoin miners back in the day, right? But eventually they're just jumping from project to project, parking their hash where they're going to make more money for the short term and turn it back in for fiat. I think you'll see some of those phase out immediately because they're probably, maybe other assets that are a little bit more profitable to mine, but I don't think it stays there because ultimately, out of all the projects in the space, and I'm not saying this because FLUX is my project. Look at use case. I mean, that's what it comes down to: is what do you need? And if you don't believe the use case for FLUX, go look at Bunny Analytics. Shout out to Bunny and his analytic page that he created, and look at the demand for FLUX. It just continues. The trend line is like this. So if you're here, you're very early. You're very you're a big piece of the puzzle, and we're going to just continue to keep growing. But yeah, I think that's what we'll probably see short term.
Okay, so the halving occurs coming up here. Is your team anticipating a drop in hash rate across the board based off of this with individuals exiting, and how does that kind of affect you guys due to the lower rewards at all?
I think the majority of the folks that are mining FLUX are going to be locked in for the long term. Especially with, we have our Fractus nodes, our Cumulus Fractus nodes coming out. So a lot of the people that mine also run nodes as well. So it's almost a symbiotic relationship where I run my rigs, deploy my nodes, now everything's working together in tandem. And, we have proof of use of work, which is right around the corner. And as a matter of fact, we just tweeted today one of our minimal viable projects, which is Headless Gaming, which basically is working right now in proof of use of work. So, the folks that are in it for the long haul and understand what that value add is down the road, they're going to stay there. It's, and a lot of time, large miners they like to get to a project they believe in. And as a matter of fact, I just talked to a guy the other day that has a pretty massive farm, and he had some questions about Flux, and I, was in Discord and said, hey, I'll talk to you. And he's like, holy cow, I guess I would never expect you to, hit me up. But, he's like, yeah, I mine things that I believe in. I don't mine things that, I'm not doing it for the quick turn. He's been through 2 or 3 cycles, so he knows what it's all about. And I think that's what it comes down to. Everybody has to understand that tolerance.
Yeah, it's always, this will be very frightening for the individual that chases profitability. I think,
oh yeah,
this is where for an individual, it sees my profits are cutting in half, so it's not worth mining this anymore. And I think, but for those individuals that are out there that are just like, nope, I'm in it for the long haul, I think they'll be more comfortable. So we talked a little bit about node operators within there. They will see the same effect. Is that correct as what GPU miners would see when it comes to rewards?
Yep. And back to the last point you made, there's no feeling worse than when you're sitting there watching a project go parabolic and you're like, I could have been mining that for the past 8 months, right? Yep. Or I could have been mining that for the past 3 years. And we have people in our Discord now who were in there, they were mining Flux when it was a penny,
Wow.
So they're like, hey, it's all good, right? So, you got the next generation that's going to come through, and it's going to be that everything's secular in this market. You know what I mean? It ebbs and flows. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. And I'm sorry, what was your question again?
No, so we were just talking about node operators. They're going to see the same experience that GPU miners are going to see when it comes down to rewards. Is that accurate?
Yep. Yeah, that is. And, it goes across the board because the block rewards. The node operators will continue to see, the parallel assets, so on and so forth. If you're mining to a pool, you'll see your parallel assets as well. People that are deploying Fractus nodes, there's going to be cumulus Fractus nodes. They'll be able to get additional rewards. We're also working on mapping out right now our roadmap for this year. And the reason why we didn't drop it last year is because we literally finished everything on our roadmap in December with like a day to go, like literally ahead of schedule.
Way to go, guys. Save it to the last minute. So, way to go.
Yeah. Well, we annihilated our first quarter because we actually brought our first quarter into our fourth quarter and we finished it up. So, IPFS, persistent storage, Jetpack 2.0, which is now called Flux Cloud, all, fiat on-ramp, all these different things. These were planned for Q1. Now we did them in Q4. So we had to go back to the drawing board and say, what can we bring forward? So we sped up proof of use of work a little bit. We sped up, the Fractus nodes, which, Project Thunder, if you've been in it long enough, that was the code name, right? Storage node.
Yeah.
So, I think it's great for everybody. If you're a node operator or a miner, if you're paying attention to what's going on in front of you, you're going to understand where we're headed.
Got it. So, talking about Flux nodes there a little bit more, traditionally you need X amount of Flux collateral that you put up in order to, for the Flux nodes and things like that. Will that have any price adjustment to this or regarding X amount of Flux is necessary, or no, will everything stay the same?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And I meant to bring that up earlier when I said there was 2 different parts to the ecosystem. You have the mining side, block reward, which also rewards the nodes. But then you have what we call the collateral halving, which basically lowers the collateral and people stand up more infrastructure. One of these is set in code, and that is the halving that's going to happen in February. That is in the code. That is the Bible of Flux. It's there forever. Our fixed supply, our halving structure, that is there. The other piece that is not in that is the collateral halving. This is done in a fixed manner. This is done on demand. So when our network starts to get to a point where it's about 50% in utilization, then we'll start our collateral halving. Because we went from 2,500 nodes to 16,000 nodes, right, with our last collateral halving. So my anticipation is we move into the next collateral halving, we'll be at 35,000 nodes. That gives us enough, if our calculations are correct and we've done it right, that makes us one of the most powerful networks out there, hands down. I mean, we're already darn close to it. But you know, it definitely will give us a ton of space to run. Now, I don't see that happening. Then again, right? So like I projected, like, hey, we're not going to hit these marks for another 6 months. 3 days later, we're already there. So I mean, it just depends on the adoption speed. But I don't see that collateral happening this year, maybe next year. But then again, all it takes is, you know, 3 or 4 Twitter decides to come run on Flux. I mean, you know, we're going to need infrastructure stood up immediately. So
then you're going to have to force the halving in order to encourage more nodes to be stood up in order to support.
That's right. That's right. And everybody that's running nodes knows the drill. They're already ready for it. I mean, I've already started planning, you know, my next phase of nodes on top of that. Like, so, I mean, people plan ahead, and that's a good thing.
So I have a Titan node. I've talked about it in the past. We've gone from there. I actually got it day one that you guys released it, at least publicly, where it was. And so that is a little bit different than traditional node and your rewards that are provided. So with that setup, though, you're locked in at a certain percentage in APR for 12, 6, or 3 months based off of that. So I think mine was like 8.8, which was awesome, like day one. Is that going to be affected by this or not at all? Like, you'll still consider to get those 8.8% flux that you've put up for collateral?
Well, it's a variable just like everything else. So it's just another node. So we would expect the same situation, which is for the halving to occur. There'll probably be some chop here in between here and there, right? And then it eventually will steady, it'll level itself out. So I would say Titan is a beta. It's still today. I mean, we're still testing it. So
crazy beta, by the way.
It's a crazy, I know, right? That got out of hand real quick, as Ron Burgundy would say. You know, that escalated quickly. But you know, my guess is it'll hover probably around where it was as we start to see a correction. And the other thing you have to keep in mind as well is the market is flat overall, right? So as the market starts to correct and we start to see some light on the other end of the tunnel, which I think we're close to that within sometime this year. I mean, most people are saying into 2024. I don't believe that. I think it's going to be this year probably.
I hope so.
Yeah. So I think it's a great opportunity for folks to, keep building their position, whatever project they invest their resources in. So I think so. Long story short is it's yet to be determined, but I envision it being around the same.
Okay. So to wrap things up, our last question here. So we're in this bear market, and it sucks as a miner. We totally understand. And miners are always concerned about rewards and about profitability and such like that. So kind of looking on the upswing, on the positive note of this, we're just getting into 2023. What does it look like what events do you think will occur this year for Flux that you think could provide price discovery? Like, I know we talked a lot about different projects and use case. Like, that's what makes the difference between one project to another is the pure use case of Flux. Any thoughts on that?
Well, at heart, I'm a miner at heart. That's how I came into the space. And I still love that. I still understand where all the miners are sitting there. And I'm talking to every single one of the miners that are listening to me right now. Mm-hmm. Flux is changing the paradigm of how you mine, right? It isn't going to be a speculatory piece anymore. It isn't going to be a consensus mechanism that's just doing transactional validation. With proof of use of work, you will become an active participant. You will become a business owner because your GPUs will be able to provide computational resources to people willing to pay the premium. And if you don't think it's expensive, go check out what AWS is charging you for a GPU. And you tell me. You can do the math real quick if you look at it. Go on, AWS's website, look at dedicated GPU rentals, and you tell me. ChatGPT is spending somewhere, I heard, $3 million a day.
Oh my!
For their infrastructure, right? Now think about that. Put that together. They're talking about being a 26 or 27. $28 billion company. It sounded like Joe Biden there for a minute. It's gonna be huge. And so you will we're changing the paradigm of how mining is utilized. And honestly, it's fixing one of the biggest glaring issues in mining since day one, and that is, what do we use these compute resources for other than just transactional validation and consensus? So that's huge.
Correct. Yeah, that is always the hard part, listening to you're listening to things going on down in Washington and things like that, individuals trying to explain the purpose of this, and they just, it's just for transactions. And it's like, oh my gosh, like there's so much more to this, but there isn't a knowledgeable individual speaking to it. So they just see it as like, it's just doing transactions. And it's like, no, there's a pure utility here. And I know you've said it many times. It's like, what worldly problem is it solving? What is it addressing? And you had talked a lot about cost of infrastructure is one, decentralization is another, and then we get into everything going on. So yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting things. I'm hoping 2023 is definitely the year for Flux, some breakout opportunity, especially as a miner, as a staker. I'm looking at price discovery. Price discovery is great, but for me, I'm in it more for the long haul. So I don't mind doing things like the Titan nodes and stuff like that, because it's like, I'm not using that Flux. I don't plan to use that Flux during that time period. So very, very cool. Well, Dan, I appreciate you joining me today, and I appreciate the audience. Guys, we took a lot of these questions from Twitter and also from YouTube. You guys had a boatload of questions. I wanted to keep things centralized around the halving. This will not be my last time that I get to sit down with Dan. We're planning another sit down in the future, live, which will be really cool, with each other, hanging out, taking those random Flux questions you guys have. So I look forward to that. So from myself and Dan, thank you guys very much for joining us. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Over the last 12 months, I've been working with a handful of designers on a special project, and I'm excited to announce that project is now live. Let me introduce you to a new apparel web store, hobbyistminers.store, hardware merch for enthusiasts just like you and I. Working with a few designers, we decided to launch the store with 17 unique NVIDIA Founders Edition graphics card designs. These designs are all custom made, unique, and one of a kind. What's your favorite Founders Edition? Was it the GTX 1080 Ti? Or maybe the RTX 2080? We can't forget about the RTX 3060 Ti, or how about everyone's favorite, the RTX 3070? So what's different about hobbyistminers.store? Well, every 3 months, these designs will be decommissioned and gone forever, making them a limited time run. But no fear, every 3 months, brand new designs will be released of your favorite graphics cards. To give you an idea, hobbyistminers.store has 68 designs in reserve to be released over the next 12 months. Go check out hobbyistminers.store today and their winter collection, only for sale until March 31st. Then they're gone. But no fear, the spring collection is standing by. Go check it out, www.hobbyistminers.store.